or I have a little bit of a delay. Anyways, this is the assignment for social studies. Hopefully I can try to have this video to explain it. I know it's not necessarily the most direct assignment if you just read it, so hopefully I can explain this, and we may have less questions, or you may have more questions, and then I can clarify it some more. So this is kind of the assignment, right? It's historical models of democracy. So remember, our historical models, that was ancient Athens and that was the Iroquois. And this is 4 pillars, different nations. So I think we already know what we're going to talk about in this assignment. The Iroquois, the ancient Athens, the 4 pillars of democracy, and how they're represented in the different nations. So here's our introduction. The Louvre, Abu Dhabi displays art, manuscripts, and objects of historical and cultural significance. The Louvre is looking to create a past to present exhibition. An exhibition is kind of like when they have like a themed wing or a themed display, right? On the history of democracy. That should be capitalized. Come on, Mr. Callan. History of democracy. They want to include information on both the Iroquois Confederacy and ancient Athens in their exhibit. A display will be used to share information about the societies and how the 4 pillars of democracy were present in both. And so that's what's happening. Your task. You have been tasked with creating a presentation or display that will be included in this exhibit. You're going to create this presentation, because that's what a display really is, you're going to be selecting the topic, right? Either political or social structure. You're going to become an expert on the topic, and you're going to create a visual comparing the Iroquois nations to the city-state of ancient Athens. So some guidelines. You need to research and find at least 3 websites that provide evidence and examples. These will allow you to answer the expert questions. Now, you can answer all these expert questions using the textbook, but I want you to find the most accurate. Now, I'm not saying the textbook is inaccurate, but I want you to find different sources of information the best you can, right? You can't just rely on one source of information. These will allow you to answer the questions. With answering these questions, you will then decide which examples and artifacts. That'd be really awesome. So artifacts are like primary sources, right? If you can find like the wampum belt to show something, or if you can find a vase in ancient Athens pottery, something like that. If you can create that to best use and present in display, so you're going to pick examples that you find, like research you get, maybe some artifacts, and you're going to say, I'm going to talk about this in my visual. And then your display, you're going to creatively enhance people's understandings of the similarities and differences. I should be able to send this home to my mom and say, hey, did you learn anything from this? They're like, yeah, that's a really creative and engaging way to learn about this stuff. In a way, you can almost think about how would you have wanted to learn about these 2 different cultures? What is a creative way that you could have taught yourself about these 2 cultures and the pillars of democracy? So essentially, that's what you're kind of doing if you think about it, because it's going to be in a museum. Okay? The biggest thing is you have to compare the 2 communities. I don't want you to just be like, this is the Iroquois, this is the ancient Athens. I really want to say, hey, they had these similarities, hey, they had these differences. The last thing is it also must contain evidence, examples, and artifacts, as well as analysis on how the 4 pillars of democracy are present in the society. What that number 4 means is not only do you have to include your expert questions, or I guess at that point your expert answers, right? But you also have to include the 4 pillars of democracy. How are they present, right? So maybe you might say there's representation in one and not the other. I want you to kind of spell that out. Okay? Your presentation, in its conclusion, that basically means by the end of it, must give evidence to answer. So it has to answer this question. How were the 4 pillars of democracy present in the political and social structure of different historical societies? All right? So here's your process. Step 1. Well, I went 1, 3, 4. And sometimes I got to make sure I read these. 1, 2, 3. There's really 3 processes. So first, you're going to select which expert you wish to be, a political or a family expert. Then you're going to answer the question below. We'll get to these questions that belong to your expertise. I want you to use 3 different sources. My notes can be one, right? Websites can be other. Make sure they're credible websites. What that means is don't try to look to see if they're government websites instead of just Johnny's blog. Johnny's blog isn't always the most accurate. Step 2, you're going to organize your information and create a visual display presentation. The presentation should be similar to something you would see in a museum, right? So you can go on any of the museum's website and they'll have some sort of display. So you kind of want to create something, and now you might say, well, what does that mean? We'll get to that. But I really want you to be creative. This is our last social studies project of elementary. What can you make? Okay? In whatever form it is, it has to contain the information you've researched. Remember, in this assignment, you are comparing the two groups. You're not just going to say, this is what I learned about one, this is what I learned about another. It'd be really interesting to say how you can say, the Iroquois do this, ancient Athens does this. This is how they're different. Try to include multimedia in some way, pictures, sound. Do not just give me a Word document with information. I want that, but I don't want just that. And then, yeah, how can you creatively enhance the information? What are some hobbies you enjoy? How can you bring into this? Right? So how can you present it up for your creativity? If you need ideas, you can please ask. We're going to talk about that below. And before, you're going to submit the research question and the visual presentation. These will be marked together. So maybe your visual presentation doesn't have all of the information, but you hand me in the worksheet and it has all the information, I'll mark both, okay? So don't just send me a photo of your painting, send me the painting and send me the thing that I'm going to show below. I can only mark what I can see, so make sure you can allow me, this is if you're taking pictures. A lot of people have been doing this. If you take a picture of your poster, make sure every aspect is really clear, because if I can't see it, I cannot mark it. Even if you said, well, it's in there, I'm going to try the best I can, but if I can't see it, I can't give you a mark. Now, step one, these are the two groups you're going to choose from, either a political expert or a family expert. So you only have to do either the role of government and decision making or the social structure. You don't have to do both in this assignment, which is really nice. So if you do political expert, you're going to research how the Grand Council works, what is consensus, what is the Council of 500, the Assembly, what is voting, how does voting work in ancient Athens, do people vote in the Iroquois, that kind of stuff, and direct versus representative democracies. Your task is you're going to create a visual that compares how the governments were organized and functioned in the different societies. So how is the government of ancient Athens different than the government of the Iroquois? So first you have to say what they are, and then you say how they're different. Now if you want to focus on the family, you're going to research the clans and the nations, the rights and responsibilities of men, women, and children, the difference in the rights between slaves, citizens, and medics, and then you're going to create a visual that compares their identities and roles and responsibilities of the different people inside the society. So one's focused on the decision-making process, the other is focused on the people inside the cultures. Alright? So here are some ideas that I could just think of. You can create some sort of model, right? You can create, so when I say model, like maybe you want to one half of it could be actually look something like ancient Athens, ancient Athens pottery. The other one could look like a wampum belt, but then you have your information in there somehow. That'd be really cool, that model. Maybe you want to create some sort of informational poster. Maybe you're really good at painting. You want to do a painting that has an image that represents it, and then all the information, a lot of the text information is on the worksheet. But then you refer to the image, right? And it makes sense. Like you draw certain pictures that are going to stick out about the role of women, right? Or maybe you want to draw the longhouse versus where the other family members live, and then you can talk about their other stuff. I don't know. It's up to you. Maybe you want to do a video. I didn't even include that. And maybe you want to do a little video, a little commercial if you want. Maybe you want to do a collage. A collage is like a collection of different pictures, and the pictures will tell you a bunch about it. The hard thing is, guys, though, do not just grab their images and say, I finished my collage, because they do have to have some text on there too, and you do have to have some information. I will mark both. Here are the questions we've been talking about. If you choose political expert, only concern yourself with this. Okay? Only concern yourself with this. So you're going to explain how the Iroquois Confederacy was formed. You're going to explain what city-states are. What process did the Iroquois Nation make to make decisions? So really, like, how did they vote? Like, did they vote? Who got a vote? How were members of the government selected? So you're going to kind of really break down. Now you don't have to use these lines. They're just there in case you wanted to print them off. You can delete it and write as much as you want there. Obviously, the more detail, the better. You put in your detailed answers here. Now, what about the process of the ancient Athenians? How was it different? Who got the vote? Who didn't get the vote? Right? The same thing. Who was in charge of the government? Things like the lottery. Here, what was the Great Law of Peace? Why was it needed? What was the Grand Council? What did it do? What was the Assembly and what did it do? What was the Council of 500 and how were the members chosen? The last one is were the societies direct or representative democracy? And this is now the understanding portion of this. Okay, so this is all knowledge. This is all stuff you should know just off the top of your head, to be perfectly honest. You should be able to answer these in one sentence. I don't want you to write the top of your head. I want you to do some real research and explain these with good detail. I don't want to say a number, but like, for instance, on a question like this, right, you should have multiple sentences. Think a mini paragraph. And now, for your understanding, right, this is where you're saying is based on the decision-making process only. So you won't talk about the role of government. You won't talk the role of women or the role of men. You're only talking about the government. How were the 4 pillars present or not present? Right? You can say, for instance, an example would be representation wasn't present in ancient Athenian decision-making. That's because it was a direct democracy and everyone voted themselves. No, they didn't vote someone in to represent them. Okay, so it's not a representative democracy. That's one example. I just gave it to you. You should be writing that down if you decide to do this. If this doesn't appeal to you, you can now do the family expert. And this is how people organize their way of lives. So now you're going to answer questions like, what were the responsibilities of men? What were the responsibilities of men in ancient Athens? What were the responsibility of women in both society? Then you're going to have to know, we didn't really talk about this, but I want you to find out, what about children? We talked about the responsibilities of children in ancient Athens, but you might have to find out about the Iroquois society. That's where some research is going to talk about. What's the difference between a clan and a nation? What is the role of both? Because there is a big difference in the both. What is the difference between a citizen, a slave, and a metic? What is the role of each? What rights or responsibilities do they have? And the last thing is, again, you're going to say how, in these areas of family and social structures, how was the 4 pillars represented? So let's talk about, maybe you can say representation is not, again, in the ancient Athenian pillar because women did not get to participate in politics. So you don't have to talk about that for a long time, but then you can at least say women, part of their role is they didn't actually get to have that kind of representation. They didn't have any representatives. This is a little self-reflection I would like you to do, and then this is our rubric. So once again, you are going to pick if you're going to be a political expert and answer these questions, or a family expert and answer these questions. Once you have the questions answered, you will then work on creating your visual, right? And your visual, again, there's no limit on what it can be. It just has to communicate information. Like I said, you want it almost, how would you have loved to teach it, right? Or how would you have loved to learn it? What is one image that we can create that I should be able to show that the grade 6s next year, and they'll be like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And so I want a visual I can post in a museum, and I want to be able to say, yep, that represents an aspect, either the politics or the family, of 2 very different cultures. Okay? Again, we can talk a little bit more if you need some more creative ideas, but really, you could do anything. And then at the very end, you're going to submit all of these to me with your answers. Oh, I went the wrong way. You're going to submit all these with your answers if you decide to do that, and your visual, and then it'll be marked using this. The big thing is you're going to be marked on your knowledge and your understanding, and then it's also going to be your visual. Okay? So the most of your marks are coming from your answers in your worksheet. Now, I'm not just marked, so if you say, well, I'm just doing the worksheet, I'm submitting it. No, because this marks will also be marked on your visual, right? So do you have the pillars of democracy present in your visual? Right? Do you have the basic questions, like the roles and responsibilities of men and women on your visual? So you need to do both, right? Your visual can't just be an image. It needs to contain some information too. Okay, so I hope this helps a little bit. Long story short, for those who are still listening, we are creating a project. You're researching questions. After those researching questions, similar to what we did last unit, So that one you had to create an advertisement. This one you're just creating a presentation, but it's going to be a visual display, right? Something visually appealing. Now it will also have information, but it will not just have information. Let me know if you have any other questions. Sorry for the long video.